is dedicated for Yeshua, Geula, Krova, Ravo, for all of Am Yisrael, all the captivity, captured, kidnapped people be released speedily from captivity, and may Hashem guard over all of our brave Chayolim and Chayalot. So we're going to start on Gimel Mabeis, around 10 lines from the bottom, that the Mishnah said that there are four primary categories of damagers: the ox, the shore, the boar, the pit, the maveh, and the hever. Hever is fire. What's maveh? So the Gemara says, my maveh, Rav Amar maveh is Adam. Rav says maveh is a human. And Shmuel says, maveh is ashen. Maveh is a tooth. So according to Rav, it refers to a person who does damage. According to Shmuel, it refers to a tooth who does damage. The Netziv asks, well, if maveh refers to a person, why doesn't it just say person? It could just say person. The word maveh, highly unusual word to use for a person. So the Netziv says that it's because the word baye means to ask, and it means to say. It can be a reference to the word prayer. And so therefore it's telling us that the essence of a human being is to pray. And we know that now because we're in an Eis Tzara for Am Yisrael, that the essence, our responsibility is to call out to God in prayer and asking for salvation. So Rav Amar Mav as Adam, back to the Gemara, says Mav as a person, Dechsev, as it states in Isaiah, Amar Shomer, that the guardian said, and Isaiah is referring to God. Hashem Yisrael says, Asa Boker, morning is coming, V'gam Laila, and also Laila, Im Tivayun Bayu, meaning to say, if you request forgiveness, you should repent. If you want forgiveness, you should repent. And that's the idea of Mava, meaning prayer, Tivayun Bayu, meaning to say, if you want forgiveness, you should repent. So we see from here that it's a reference to a human being doing teshuvah. Shmuel says Mava is Hashem. Shmuel says Mava refers to a tooth. How so? It says that they searched for Esav, they uncovered his hidden things. So nivu refers to uncovering something, like a tooth is sometimes covered, then uncovered. So Gemara says, my mashma, how do you know? Rav Yosef, like Rav Yosef explains, Idkirin is Polish, Esav is Galan Mat Murahi, that when the enemies for Esav searched in all the places that were hidden, they uncovered the hidden things. So the Gemara says, well, Rav my time Shmuel. Why does a Rav adapt Shmuel's explanation? Niva. It doesn't say Niva, it says Maveh. Shmuel my time Rav. Why doesn't Shmuel adopt Rav's position? He says Bua. So it doesn't say Bua, it says Maveh. So therefore, Rav and Shmuel both argue that the other person's pasuk is not exact. So the Gemara says, okay, you're both right. Milchti cry, well, kamar daiki, well, kamar daiki. The pasuk is not like either one. If that's the case, Rav my time Shmuel. And why doesn't Rav hold like Shmuel that it's a tooth? So he says, so Rav would say, Tana shor v'kol miloi de shor, because it says ox, and ox includes in it goring and tooth. It doesn't need to list it separately. Shmuel nami hai tana le shor. So why does Shmuel say refers to a tooth? And why does Shmuel say have to have a tooth separately? It could have been included under shor. Rav Yehuda tana shor lekarno umava l'shino. So he says, yeah. So Rav Yehuda says exactly. It lists the ox refers to the goring, and the tooth, and the mava refers to the tooth. And this is how you read the Mishnah. Loria Karen, the aspect of the ox which is goring is not have the same characteristics as the tooth. Why? Loria Karen, she'ena no aziko. The goring, the animal gets no benefit from it, and it's not like Riyah Sharon, Shane. It's not like the characteristics of the tooth. Where the animal, when it consumes it, when it does its damage, it's getting a benefit because it's eating the crop, so it gets the benefit. While it's destroying the other person's money, it's getting the value at least. And on top of 4a, Valori and the characteristics of the tooth are not like the goring. She'in kavanaso azik, because when it eats it, he doesn't want to destroy the other. The ox is not trying to destroy the person's food property; he's just trying to eat it. It's not like he's not trying to be a damager. It's not like Kariya Karen. It's not like the goring shekavanaso la'azik. When it comes to goring, there the animal is trying to hurt the other person. So we see that that's why we need both categories. So the Gemara asks the question: Shouldn't we be able to learn out goring from tooth. Ma shein kavanas lahazik, just like tooth, where the animal is not trying to hurt the person. Chayav, he's going to be liable. Karen. And when it comes to goring, shekavanas lahazik, where he's indeed trying to do damage, l'kol came for sure. You should be responsible for the damage done by your ox. So the Gemara says, no, itztrech, I'll tell you why we need it. You might have thought, you might have thought that the ox is like a slave, one of your slaves. If your slave does damage, you're not responsible for the damage that your slave does. Even though the slave is trying to do damage, and nevertheless, a person is going to be exempt if from the damage that his slave does. So we might have said also here, the ox, even though it's trying to do damage, since it doesn't get any benefit, we should say it should be exempt. So Rav Ashi says to Rav Yehuda, basically, no, there's a very good reason why we're going to say that the slaves, you're not responsible for the damage done by your slave. Why? Now, if you're going to say that the master is responsible for the damage done by his slave, then the slave has the easy get out of slave card free, because he's going to go and do damage, and then the master has to pay, and then the master will be responsible for all the damage the slave does every day, and he's going to have to release him. So that's the reason why we say that the master is not responsible for the damage done by his slave. But ox doesn't have that intent, so therefore we wouldn't think that you would be exempt, and so therefore, why do we need to have a specific verse to tell, or a specific teaching that the ox is liable? We could learn it out from a kal vachomer from the tooth. So therefore, ela parakachi. So this is how you have to explain it. Lo re'iyah karen shekavanas solahazik kire'iyah shein shekavanas solahazik. The characteristics of the goring are not like characteristics of the tooth, because the goring intends to do the damage. And the characteristics of the tooth are not like the characteristics of the goring, because the tooth gets benefit. And if we had just written the tooth, we would not have been able to learn out the goring from it. That's how Rashi explains it. So the Gemara says, okay, so now you've said, according to Shmuel, you have the goring, Karen, and you have the tooth, Shane. But there were three things that we said fit under the category of shore: Karen, Shane, and Regel. So why would the Mishnah exclude Regel? Regel is foot. Why, according to Shmuel, does the Mishnah leave out Regel? But Regel, my shiare. Why does it leave out Regel? You'd have to explain that. So the Gemara says, well, no, Shmuel would say that Regel is included in the Mishnah, because it says at the end of the Mishnah, Keshehizik chava mazik. It says when a person's property does damage, the mazik, the one who owns it, is responsible. And that general statement at the end of the Mishnah comes la'asuye Regel, comes to exclude the foot. The Gemara says, well, it's naya. Why doesn't it list it explicitly? Why? Well, it's naya ba'hedja. Why doesn't it list it explicitly and say Regel is? It should be listed explicitly in the Mishnah. So therefore, Rava says, I'll explain to you what Shmuel would say. Elam Rava Tana Shor L'Raglo Umava L'Sheno. It says when it says shor in the Mishnah, that refers to the damage done by the foot, and when it says mava, that refers to damage done by the tooth. V'hachik Amar, and what it means to say is Ori Regel. The characteristics of foot are not like the tooth. She'eziko Matzoi, because foot is something which is the damage is common, meaning say just in the normal course of things, and that is not like Shane. Shane is akamatsu. It's not like tooth, which is not in the normal course of things, and neither of these things, V'loria Shane, and the characteristics of the tooth, Sheyeshanala Zika, where the ox gets benefit, is not Kriya Regel, is not like the foot, Shane Anoa Zika, where the animal gets no benefit. If that's the case, the Karen Maishiare. So if that's the case, why does our Mishnah not include goring? How would Rav explain Shmuel's position that goring is excluded from the Mishnah? Because he says, no, that's included in the last line. All the extra damage if it does any damage, he's responsible. That includes goring. So why is that not listed according to Shmuel? So Rav would say, Shmuel would say, no, Shmuel is saying that our Mishnah is only listing those animals that are a muad from the outset, but not those animals that are a tam from the outset. Not those damaging actions which are a tam from the outset. A muad is something that we have the expectation it's going to do the damage, and a tam is something that we don't have the expectation, and so therefore it's only has to pay half damages. So foot and tooth, the first time it does it, you have to pay full damages. But goring, the first time it does it, it's called a tam. Until it goes 3 times, it's called a tam, and it only pays half damages. And so therefore, the goring is excluded because it's a different law. It's not a mu'ah yet. And so therefore, you don't have to pay the full damages. So the Gemara says, Shmuel, my time Amar Karav. So why doesn't Shmuel accept Rav's position that the Mave is a human? Amar Lucha. So Shmuel would say, Adam. He said, if you're going to say it's a human, Hakatani Seifa, it says in the next Mishnah, on Tezvav Amar Beis, it says they're a human. It says Shura Muad, V'Shura Mazik Pershus Anisik Adam. It says these are the things that are always considered a Muad. What are the things that are always considered a Muad? An ox that's gored several times, an ox in the domain of the person whose property it's damaged, they are Adam, and a person. So a person is listed in the next Mishnah. So why would he be listed in the first Mishnah? So the Gemara says, but according to you, Shmuel, why would we wait until the second Mishnah to list it? It should be listed right here. So no, our first Mishnah is talking about Beniske Mamon Kamairi, Beniske Gufo Kamairi. Our first Mishnah is talking about damage done by your money, not damage done by you yourself. V'Rav Nami. According to Rav, also a Katani Adam Sefa. So according to Rav, it says Mavasa, a man. Well, it says Adam in the second Mishnah. How would he explain that? He said Rav would say no. It's just to tell us that it's listed there because the Mishnah is listing all those things that are muad, and it's telling us that a person is a muad. So the Gemara says, well, if that's the case, according to Rav, how do we explain our Mishnah? Because it says in the Mishnah, it says in the first line of the Mishnah, let's just go back. But the Mishnah says, it starts off by saying, that the ox is not like the Mava, and the Mava is not like the ox. Meaning that they have different quality traits, they have different characteristics. So how would Rav explain that? According to Shmuel, it's obvious that one is the ox and one is the goring and one is the tooth. Or one is the regal, according to Rav, and one is the tooth. But what does it mean according to Rav? Sure. The ox is the characteristics of the ox, that if an ox kills a person, the owner of the ox has to pay the ransom. It's not Kriyad Adam, it's not like the characteristics of a human. And if he kills somebody, he doesn't pay ransom because he's put to death. Adam, and the characteristics of a person, a person has different characteristics. If a person hurts somebody else, he has to pay not only damages, but also tsar, ripoy, shevas, and boshas, pain, medical expenses, emotional distress, and lost wages. And so therefore, that is different. It's not like the characteristics of the ox, she'ein bo arba dvarim. He doesn't have to pay these 4 extra things. But it says, Atzada Shava Shabam, but then the next line of the Mishnah says, the Gemara, how would Rav explain? That both of them should darken lahazik. That both of them there's the expectation that they're going to do damage. But we can't say that about the ox. Sure, darken lahazik, an ox isn't expectation it's going to do damage. We just said that the first few times an ox scores, it's called a short time. It's called, we don't expect it to do damage. So the Gemara says, B'muad. No, we're talking about an ox that's scored several times. It's a shura muad, and so therefore, since it's scored 3 times, we're going to say it's a shura muad, and there is the expectation it's going to do the damage. Mara says, well, even a muad, darko hazik. Do we even say this about a muad that once it's scored? Do we really say that it's its manner to gore? That's not the case even by a muad. Mara says, yeah, we do. Even the eid. orcheu. Since it's become a muad for this, it's become its expectation that this is going to act. Even though it's not its natural nature, once it scores 3 times, it's become a muad, then we're saying that that's, it tasted violence, and that's how it's going to act. So the Gemara says, well, what about the fact, Adam Darko Hazik? So what about a person? Does a person really have the expectation to do damage? Gemara says, yeah. Even though while he's awake, he's not his expectation is going to do damage. Biyashin, while he's sleeping, then he does damage. Biyashin, Yashin. Biyashin. So Gemara says, Yashin Darko Hazik, he does sleeping, while he's sleeping, he does damage. Gemara says, yes. Keeping the Kayafu Pashit Orchilu. Since while he's sleeping, he doesn't know what he's doing. He's moving around, he's throwing out his limbs. We have to have the expectation to do damage. Well, Gemara says, yeah, but the next line in the Mishnah says, Ushmirasan Alecha, that it's your responsibility to guard the ox. But if it's an Adam, if it's a person, Shmiros Gufo Alafu, it shouldn't say it's upon you, it's upon him. He has to guard himself. The Gemara says, yeah, but that's just a technical problem with the wording, with the language, and we have easy way of dealing with that. Because how would you explain the brisa of Karna? How the Tani Karna, that Karna is a brisa, where he taught Arba Avos Nazik, and he said there are 4 primary cases of damage, but Adam Echaman, and one of them is a person, one of them is a human being. And there it says Arba Avos Nazik, Adam Echaman, and there in that brisa, it says, the brisa says, and Shmirasan Alecha. And there, according to you, it should say Shmiras Gufo Alafu. It should say it's upon him, not upon you to guard it. Elakad Amarle Rabbi Avo. So like Rabbi Avo said about that brisa of Karna, with Tana, he said it to the Tana who taught the brisa of Karna, Tani Adam Shmiras Gufo Alav. Change it to saying Shmiras Gufo Alav. And so too, on top of 4b, Achinami, Tani Adam Shmiras Gufo Alav. We have to say his responsibility is upon him. So, okay, we're at the top of 4b. So the Gemara says, well, let's say other possibilities. Rav says Mava is a human, and Shmuel says it's a tooth. But Maskefla Rav Mari, the Ima Mava Zamayim. Maybe Mava is water, that if a person, maybe it means if a person pours his water into the public domain, and somebody else comes and breaks his utensils on it, then the person who poured the water is responsible. Kedeksev, as it states in the Pasuk, in Isaiah, Kikdoach Eish Hamasim, Mayim Tiva Eish. So that's the pasuk, and the pasuk means that it's like when the fire burns, then those things that are the Hamasim, those things that melt, Kamayim Tiva Eish, like water bubbles in fire. So that's the pasuk. So therefore, we see that Mave. There's water. The Gemara says, no, miksiv mayim nivu. Does it really state that the water will be nivu? That would imply that it would be referring to the water, that the water is causing the fire to bubble. But rather what it states is tiva eish, meaning to say it's said in the singular and in the feminine. And that implies that tiva is on the fire, and the fire is what's causing the water to bubble. And the pasuk means, according to that approach, that just like water that the fire causes to bubble, and so therefore that means that Mava is not said about the water. So the Gemara says, "Maskevor Rav Zvid." So Rav Zvid challenges us. Mava Eish. Maybe why don't we just say Mava is fire, as it states, the Chiksev Tiva Be'eshu Dechsev. It says explicitly Tiva Be'esh. The Gemara says, no, if Mava was fire, it can't be that Mava is fire, because it says in the Mishnah Mava and Hever is clearly fire. We want to say, well, the Mishnah is just explaining the word, Hever is explaining Mava. That's the case. Why would it say that there are 4 primary cases of damage? There would be 3. And if you want to say no, it says 3, it says 4, and Mavis Hever, and Shor has 2 in it because it has Regel and Shane, or Shane and Karen. If you want to say that maybe Shor has 2, well, if that's the case, when it says that Mava has the spirit of life in it, or is an animating force in it, if you're saying Mava is fire, my Ruach Chaim is big. What visu my aish. And what? And first of all, fire doesn't have anything moving in it. It's not a living thing. And also, why does it say mave is like the characteristics of fire? It is a fire. So therefore, that's a big problem with it. So now we've established, our Mishnah says that there are four primary cases of damage. And again, as I said yesterday and the day before, that we have to look at these first few pages of Bava Kamma as an introduction to the whole Masechta. So now, speaking along those lines, the Gemara cites a price so that maybe there are 13 primary categories of damage. Then we're going to have another price that says that maybe there are 24 primary categories of damage. So that's this is really just like an introduction to the survey, introduction to the tractate. Tani Rav Oshaya, Shloshasar Avos Nizikin. There are 13 primary categories of damage, and Rashi says what this means, that there are 13 cases that are written in the Torah explicitly, which you're responsible for the damages. And what's the first one? Shomer Chinam. Rashi says somebody who is responsible to guard something for free, and there you're liable even for negligence. And that's the first case. And then the next one is a shoel. A shoel is a borrower. There, a borrower, you're even liable for an accident, something beyond expectation whatsoever. And then we have no say schar, v'asocher. No say schar, somebody who's hired to do it, and asocher is somebody who rents it. And there, both those two categories, they're liable for theft and for sure for negligence. And all of these are written explicitly in the Parashat Rashi says. And we're going to talk about the God willing when we come to Bava Metzia in around 260 days. We'll get to Daf Tzadi Dalet and Bava Metzia, and there we'll talk about the Shomrim. And so therefore they're called Avos. And the Gemara is going to ask later on, well, if they're called Avos, what are the Tolados of it? But anyway, in the meantime, we're still going through Hoshaya's list of 13. And then we have the 5 categories of damages that are done, that a person who does damage has to pay. Nezek, Tsar, Ripoy, Sheves, Aboshes. Damage, which is Rashi says that this, if somebody strikes his friend, he has to give him the depreciation that he cost him by ruining his value. And Tsar, we have to say how much would a person be willing to pay to get this amount of pain. And then we have Ripoy, Sheves, and Boshes. Ripoy is medical expenses, and Sheves is lost wages because of this unable to work, and Boshes is humiliation. And all of these are written explicitly in the Torah. So therefore, and then in addition to that, we have the Arba, the Masnisin. Then we have the 4 of the Mission. That's how we get to 13. Hatleisar. Then we get to 13. Gemara says, "V'tana didan my time alotani hani." So why does the author of our mission not list all these other 9? Why does it stop at 4? Gemara says, "Bishlam Shmuel, who says that Shane is a tooth." It makes sense. Why? Because he would say, "Beniske mamon kamayri, beniske gufo kamayri." We're not talking about the human. We're only talking about the damage done by his money. But according to Rav, who says that it is a reference to, according to Rav, it says it's a reference that Mav is a human, it should list also these cases. El Rav listening, according to Rav, well, how would he explain Rav Oshaya's Brisa? So he says, Tani Adam, de Adam. So he says, no, when it says Adam, it lists, when it says person, it lists all those who come under the category of a person. Mar says, Rav Oshaya, Nami Atanalei Adam. Well, according to Rav Oshaya, why does it have to list all these categories? It already says a person. And Mar explains, Trey Gavne Adam. There are 2 categories of a man. There are Tana Adam, the Izik Adam, the Tana Adam, the Izik Shor. That there are Mishnahs referring to the cases of a person who strikes an ox, and then there are other cases where a person strikes another man. Well, if that's the case, Shor Nami Lisnei Trey Gavne Shor. If that's the case, according to Rav Oshaya, you should also list the 2 different types of oxen. That there is there's a shor the Izik shor. List a shor the Izik shor. You should list the case of an ox that gores another ox. You pay damages. List a shor the Izik adam. It should list the case of an ox that gores a human, where you have to pay the kofar, the ransom penalty, the extra money. Mar says, "Hi, mai." No, why? Bishlama adam the Izik shor. If a man damages an ox, nezakud the mishalim, he pays full damages. and Adam the Izik Adam, and if a man strikes another man, then he's Mishayim Arbadvarim. Then he pays these additional four things of Sari, Poisheves, and Boshes. Ella sure, but if he strikes if an ox strikes another ox, Maui shore the Izik shore, Maui shore the Izik Adam, Idi vi Idi Nezekudu Shalim. In both cases, he pays full damages, whether the ox scores a human or whether the ox scores uh, a another ox. Even though we could say, no, there is a difference. He only pays kofar if he strikes an ox, if he kills a human, but they don't get into that. Gemara says, but what about the fact, what about the case of a person who's a watchman, that those are really cases where a man is damaging an ox, he's damaging the property. To Adam the Izik Shor, who the Katani, it's where a person is damaging the other guy's money, and yet it lists in the Brisa. Gemara explains, Tani Ezika de Biadayim, Tani Ezika de Mamela. So he says, okay, there's two types of damages that Rabbi Shaya lists. One is where he does the damage directly with his hands, and one is where he does the damage Mamela, meaning to say the damage comes on its own, and therefore he learns that on itself. So then the Gemara says, Tani Rebbe Chia, as from the Arba Avos Nazikin, there are actually 24 categories of damage. 24, not 13. What are the 24? He adds on the following cases. There's Tashlume Kefel. If a person steals something, he does theft, and then he gets caught, he has to pay double. Tashlume Arba V'Chamisha. If he steals a sheep or a ox, and then he sells it or slaughters it, he has to pay 4 or 5 times the amount. The Ganav, and then there is a case of a robber who steals something, and then he admits it on his own before he's caught, so then he has to pay it back. And Gazlan is somebody who robs by force, and all these cases he has to pay it back. The Edim Zomamin, and these are witnesses who are discovered to be false witnesses so much that their whole testimony is impeached from the outset. They have to pay the damage that they caused. Va'ones va'mefate. And also we have the woman who is assaulted or seduced. Motzi Shema, as it says in Parashas Kiseitze, that if a man libels his virgin wife, va'metame, somebody who makes somebody else's possessions, his truma, somebody else's truma tame, va'medame, somebody who mixes the truma with the chulin. Amenasech, somebody who takes the other person's wine and causes it to become avodah zarah. All these cases, you're doing damage. And in addition to that, the hani placer, and then we have the 13 of Rav Oshaya, ha'eser and the arba. Then we have the 24. So that Rav Chia has his brisa as we get to 24. Rav Oshaya has his brisa as you get to 13. So Gemara asked the question, Rav Oshaya, my time lo tani hani. Why does Rav Oshaya not list the extra 9 of Rabbi Chia? He says, says, I'm dealing with actual money, but the extra 9 of Rabbi Chia were punitive damages, kinasa, fine. And so therefore, I didn't list those. I was only dealing with the Nezikin of actual damages. Okay, we'll stop here with this tremendous stuff. We should have Yeshua for Am Yisrael. And I'll see everybody upstairs, God willing. We'll dive in 10 minutes, God willing.